and I have just entered a massive long position on Bitcoin for one specific reason. Bitcoin has been falling off an absolute cliff. Everyone is worried, are we in a bull market or are we in a bear market? So what are my thoughts, what are my levels, and what is my future prediction? The first thing we're going to have a look at is basically how a market moves, because 99% of people are worried for absolutely no reason. Recently, Bitcoin has been taking quite the hit, but let me tell you this, it is necessary in order for a market to go up that it comes down. We have three conditions: the bullish sentiment, a consolidation, and a bearish sentiment. And we see all three even in a bull market. You see, when a market has a pump, it does one of two things. Either it starts consolidating or it starts showing signs of bearish sentiment. That is simply necessary in order for it to go up once again. It cannot just keep going up and keep going up. That's not how any market works. So whenever we see a large move up, you can expect either a consolidation to take place or some sort of bearish sentiment or pullback. We saw the exact same thing in January or early 2025. We had a large move from the last consolidation, and then we were basically met with a small pullback or bearish sentiment. We now see the exact same thing, right? Bitcoin has been moving up quite a bit, and now we're sort of seeing that bearish sentiment or pullback happening once again. This is not the first time Bitcoin has done this. It does it every cycle, and every time an asset goes up, well, then it comes down. Let's talk about one of the reasons why. Right now, we're looking at Nvidia, and as you guys can see, this company has had a wild year, mostly because of artificial intelligence, right? People are still very interested in AI. Artificial intelligence or AI is still a new narrative, which means people still see it as a risk-on investment. That also means that all the risk-on capital have been flowing into AI stocks instead of into cryptos like Bitcoin. Not only that, but we have Donald Trump in the White House who can change market sentiment in a tweet. That also means that the fear and greed index for Bitcoin is currently sitting at an extreme fear. Now, if you guys know anything about crypto, you always buy the fear. So let's zoom in a little bit here. Now we're looking at a daily chart, and I have just entered a massive long position on Bitcoin for one specific reason. We've just hit what I like to call an order block, and it was at the bottom of the range, which means it's in a discount area. It's not in a premium, it's in a discount. Does that mean I am now expecting a full-on bull market and Bitcoin to just explode from this point forward? No, absolutely not. My next Bitcoin target is going to be right around 94,000 because that is the middle point of this small range that you're seeing here. Whenever we have pullbacks in very trending markets, as you can see, we can look at previous price action here. These pullbacks tend to end somewhere around the middle of the range. So that means even if Bitcoin is still bearish, I would still like to take advantage and capitalize on these pullbacks within the downtrending market. So again, my next target for Bitcoin is the middle of this range, and then I will see once we reach there how price reacts. But of course, there goes more into this analysis than just a random order block. And right now we are looking at a historical moment from the RSI point of view. Take a look at the bottom here. We have just reached oversold area for the first time in months. Last time price was this low on the RSI was in February of 2025. And guess what? Shortly after we hit the oversold area on the RSI, well then Bitcoin pumped 70% and made new all-time highs at 126,000. We are now seeing the exact same thing here, and so that is a major reason for price to start going higher. Not only that, but we also have this bullish RSI divergence, which basically means that the RSI has swept a low that the real price has not. That's what we call a divergence, and historically speaking, this can set off rallies like there's no tomorrow. So when do I think people need to be worried? Well, let me explain. I've already said exactly how a market operates. We see a rally. That rally is then followed by a consolidation because it has to in order to give us another rally. That's then followed by a consolidation or a slight bear market, then followed by a rally, and so on. That is exactly how a market moves. And so since 2022, we've not had one singular shift in sentiment. And the last time we got an actual shift in sentiment was in 2021, which was also that famous bear market. In my opinion, there's no need to be worried until we see the exact same thing happen, which we haven't seen in years, right? If Bitcoin now gets a significant weekly closure below this low that I've annotated here, well, then we can start to talk about a bear market, because then at that point, that would be abnormal, right? The last time we saw this was in 2021. Another thing I want to point out that further adds to the long idea that I had is the rate cut expectations in December. We have a Fed meeting on the 10th of December, and right now people are pricing in an 82.9% chance of a 25 base point rate cut. And in case you didn't know, well then rate cuts are typically very bullish for risk assets like Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price typically rises afterwards due to more liquidity in the market and higher risk appetite among investors. I want you to look at it like this. This is a bank pre-rate cut. They offer people money, and investors, well, they can borrow that money. Before the rate cut takes place, well, then borrowing that money is very, very expensive. However, when we do get that rate cut, well, then borrowing that money becomes a lot cheaper, and we get a whole lot more investors that are now borrowing that money. That essentially means that investors have more money between their hands, and so they are way more likely to invest in risk assets such as Bitcoin. Now, let's be realistic about it. What you're looking at here is a 100-day EMA, and every single time price has slipped below that 100-day EMA, well, then a massive rally has followed. 2019, it was a 221% rally. 2020, it was a 1500% rally. 2022, it was a 730% rally. And in 2025, we don't know yet. The price hasn't dipped below the 100 EMA since basically 2022. So there's a chance that we're going to see a little bit more of a bear market here. But then inevitably, once we dip below that 100 period EMA, we are going to get that massive rally. I also want to talk about Ethereum because right now we are currently in a very, very interesting place. And as we speak, I have just gone long from what I like to call my golden zone. That is the 71 and the 79% of the Fibonacci extension tool. I've drawn it from the most recent pullback low and all the way up to the most recent high. This was what I got. And as soon as the market approached these zones, well, then I went long from basically the middle point. Now starting to see a nice pullback here, but worst case scenario, we completely violate these two zones. And then my next target for price becomes $2,107, which is right below this low. Once we reach that low, well, then I might start looking for longs again. But as we speak, I do think this is a really, really possible area for Ethereum to start going parabolic. And if we take a look at the Bitcoin long-term power law, well, then we can clearly see that it's been struggling at this midline resistance here. I can almost guarantee you that once price eventually breaks through this middle resistance here, well, then we will absolutely skyrocket to new highs. And in my opinion, there is absolutely no reason to worry. That was my outlook on Bitcoin. Again, yes, we are seeing a little bit of a bear market here. Is there any reason to be worried? Absolutely not. I want you to look at this as an opportunity and nothing more than an opportunity.